So what I thought to do today, because we are in the weeks from Passover to Shavuos, we have the weeks that we learn every week another chapter of Ethics of the Fathers. There are 6 weeks, 6 Shabbos between Passover and Shavuos. So we learn it for 6 weeks. And then we learn in the summer another time. And then we learn another time. And then we learn in the summer another time. Until we get to the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. So really, from Passover until Rosh Hashanah, every single week we learn this one chapter, or at the end we learn 2 to finish it off, of this, it's called a Mishnah of Ethics of the Fathers, which are all very moral statements on going beyond, in terms of how one should behave. And it's really, especially, it's considered, now we're learning them in preparation for the holiday of Shavuos when we get the Torah. So we get the Torah, we have to be ready. So we're working on our character, we're working on our morality, working on our relationship with God. So it's very appropriate to learn this work, 1 chapter a week, to improve ourselves. In the summer, we keep learning it from after Shavuos until Rosh Hashanah, because the summer could already be a dangerous time spiritually. It's hot. People have a tendency to dress less and to just feel more like vacation mode, free mode, not being as careful with one's morals and values mode. So sort of to keep us in line, to keep us on God's page, we learn this also every Shabbos of the summer. So from Passover until Rosh Hashanah, every single Shabbos we learn this. So from Passover until Rosh Hashanah, we've learned it 4 times. But now we're going through the first cycle from Passover till Rosh Hashanah. So yesterday, we do it on the Sabbath, on the Shabbos. So yesterday was the second Shabbos since Passover, meaning it's been 2 weeks since Passover. And yesterday was the second Shabbos. And we learned chapter 2. So I thought we would do some ideas from chapter 2. So not going to do anything too deeply, just the very facts, the words themselves, I think, are very powerful and resonate a lot of very strong ideas here. So in the first, what's called Mishnah, that's how we refer to these sections of, so the first Mishnah 1 of chapter 2. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the prince, said, "What is the right path that a man should choose for himself? That which is honorable to himself and brings him honor from man. Be as careful in the performance of a seemingly minor commandment as of a major one." We could say, oh, that's small, that's not so important. For you do not know the reward given for the commandments. You have no clue how God values something. So very often we could look at something and say, oh, it's not so important. Like, yeah, it'd be nice if I did it, but we don't view it as very big on the totem pole, but we don't know how God views it. And we have many stories of people that did things that they didn't realize were so special. But in the next world, those things really, really save them or help them enormously, put them in an entirely different stature. Because again, we have no clue what God is viewing as big or little. A lot of times people bash themselves in life. Oh, I'm not doing anything. And so-and-so, not in a negative way, like you're upset that anyone else is doing good. You're happy, but so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and this person, all around you, you envision everyone's doing all these great, wonderful things. And then you feel like you're not really doing anything, but you don't know how God values what you're doing. And it could be that what you view as so small, God views as so huge. Consider the loss incurred in the performance of a commandment against the reward earned by its observance. So the loss of a commandment, what will be the loss incurred in a commandment? Maybe it costs you a lot of money. For those of you that are maybe eating kosher meat, to make sure you're not eating meat that was cut up before it was properly killed. Well, that's a lot more expensive than not kosher meat. Or Maybe it's the time it takes you to pray and to say psalms, maybe the money of giving charity. So those are the losses we might view of doing the commandment. So think of, okay, that's a loss, and it took you an amount of time, and that time's a loss because instead of doing other things that time, you wasted the time praying or studying or saying psalms. So you think of the loss and then think of the gain. What that means that you did a commandment, what that means that you and God were one, what that means that you serve God and how that is a piece of eternity, is forever. So think of the loss and then think of the gain. And conversely, the gain derived from a sin against the loss that will follow. So we have the gain we get from a sin and the loss that follows the sin. So when we were talking about commandments, we have what we're viewing as the loss, and then the gain, of course, the gain of what's going to happen afterwards after I fulfill this. But if I think of it in terms of a transgression, it's more like there's the gain, what I think I'm gaining by doing this transgression. And then what's going to happen afterwards, the loss. So if we would think of it like that, think of something you struggle with. Okay, let's everyone try to apply this practically. Think of something you struggle with. You struggle with. So what's the gain when you do something wrong? What is your gain? Anyone? If you think of something you're struggling with, maybe you struggle with anger, maybe you struggle with pride, maybe you struggle with honesty, maybe you struggle with charity, maybe you struggle with prayer, maybe you struggle with being kind and respectful to people, maybe you struggle with being happy and not upset or depressed. Think of something you struggle with. And what's the gain? What's the gain when you do something wrong? What can you articulate as your gain? Anyone? Maybe it's hard to think of it in a vacuum. Let's take one thing just to sort of play this out. Let's say we're talking about impatience.
Yes, that's me.
Okay, so let's say you struggle with patience, and the doing something wrong here would be to act or speak in a way that's impatient. Mm-hmm. So what's the gain in doing that? What's the gain in acting impatient? How would we define that? The gain of a transgressive versus the loss of transgression. So what's the gain in being impatient?
The immediate short-term gain would be, for that moment, I get people's attention. For that moment, I get what I want.
Okay, that's a nice way to put it. So Becca said, if she's impatient and instead of politely, patiently, she just like snaps and says, hello, why is nobody helping me? Why is nobody paying attention? Why didn't anyone bring this to the table when I asked everybody 3 times? So woo, everyone pays attention, and then whatever she wanted happens. That's the gain. Okay, that's a good way to put it. It's a temporary, or maybe it's even just a sense of like, I expressed myself, I did it. If someone's angry and they could control their anger, or they can give into their anger, and giving into anger is like a feeling of, you see, I showed them, I told them, I expressed it myself, I did it. I feel good that I just let loose and snapped. I guess that's the gain.
Yes.
What's the loss? Judah the prince is saying, think of the gain you get from a sin against the loss that will follow. What's the loss?
The loss is my sense of peace, my calmness. The loss is possibly, to some degree, my relationship with the person that I'm talking to or whoever I'm lashing out at, some kind of loss there, their hurt feelings, their trust in me, or a loss of maybe how they perceive me, how they look at me. Maybe they saw me as a nice person, a positive person before. Like
5 minutes ago, yeah.
yeah, if it's like somebody in the checkout line at the store or something, maybe a friend or acquaintance, and they thought of me as a nice person, and now, no, she's not such a nice person. So
Yudanasi is saying, the prince is saying, okay, so Becca, we went through one example. Becca was saying it. So the gain is just giving into myself, letting my voice being heard, getting what I want at that moment. The loss is maybe in the relationship, maybe in my self-image, maybe in my self-control, maybe in my restraint. So Yudanasi is saying, Judah the prince is saying, use this understanding to keep from sin. When you're in the moment, when you're in the heat of that moment, think about this. Understand, yes, there's a temporary gain. If there wasn't any gain, we would not be doing this. Like even things that seem so like irrational, if it didn't feed us in some way, we wouldn't be doing it. If someone's if you imagine a child having a temper tantrum, right? You're like, why are you making yourself so miserable? Well, don't bother asking that. But I'm saying the point is that there's something they're gaining. There's some indulgence, some pleasure, something that they feel is the gain from this temper tantrum, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. That's just how it works. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. So just as we look at this child this is his pleasure, this child having this meltdown, this is a pleasure, this is an indulgence, doesn't look too much fun to me. But it is. On some level, it is, because otherwise he wouldn't be doing it. So we have to look at ourselves and understand ourselves the same way. If I'm doing something wrong. Now, again, sometimes we don't know it was wrong. Before you joined this class, maybe there are many things that you were doing that you thought were fine, and you only found out over the course of, various classes that, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. Oh, God doesn't let. Oh, okay. So if you don't know that God says no, it's a different story. But once you're aware that God does not allow it, and then you, as a human being, do it anyway, you have to ask yourself these two questions. What is my temporary, transient, in the moment gain of being upset, of raising my voice, of being dishonest, of not praying or not saying psalms, or dressing immodestly, or not being respectful? What is my gain? Let me define it. And then let me ask myself, and what is my loss? If I don't give the charity, if I say something that's not true, if I gossip, if I express anger, or if I indulge in sadness, what is my loss? And he's saying, think of these two things. Think of the gain. You think there's a gain, think of the gain, and then think of the loss. Think of the gain and think of the loss. Think of the gain and think of the loss. And if you're training yourself to think that way, he says, you're not going to sin. It is not worth it. The gain is very transient. The loss sticks with you for a long, 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 long time. It's not worth it. So again, you can say, well, wow, if I was so thought out, of course I would never sin in the first place. But you don't have to only do this in the moment of temptation, because we usually know what our problems are. So we could think about them sometimes when we're not in the heat of the moment, and think of like, so why did I say that? Why was I so mean to that person? Why did I gossip? Why was I petty? Why was I dishonest? Why did I boast? What did I gain from that? Made me feel good? Made me feel like I'm important? It made me feel good to make someone else feel I'm important? Or what did I lose in that? What of self did I lose? it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. And that's the process he wants us to go through as action by action, transgression by transgression. We're going to come to the same bottom line. It's not worth it because it really is not worth it. Reflect upon three things and you will not come to sin. Know what is above you. An eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all of your deeds are recorded in the book. So this is very like basic thoughts. But especially in our generation, we can really envision this all-seeing eye and all-hearing ear and everything being recorded on videotape for posterity. So we can really relate with this, and we can really understand that this is meant as a very, very literal truth. That very literally, everything we're doing is seen, everything we're doing is here, everything we're doing is recorded, everything we're doing. God so appreciates our good more than we could ever imagine. And God is so harmed by our bad more than we can ever imagine. So it sort of balances out because our good is far more valuable than we get, and our wrong is far more impactful than we get. But we don't want to take from this in a negative way, like, oh, okay, fine, I should be depressed about what a washout I am, but more in a positive way of like, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that Judah the Prince is saying, I'm trusting you to be thoughtful. He's trusting us to, we could actually think through these things and say, wait, what is my gain in indulging in unhappiness? What do I gain by being in a bad mood? I mean, there must be a gain, otherwise why would I do it? So what do I gain? It's just an indulgence in what? Like what exactly is that positive? It's feeding me by being in a bad mood. All right. And then what do I lose by it? Was it worth it? The answer is always supposed to be no. So we have to, indulgence by indulgence, wrong by wrong, sort of dissect it this way. And then we realize it's really, really, really not worth it. Okay, let's go to Mishnah 4, the fourth statement in this chapter. This is Rabbi Gamliel, the son of this Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Judah the Prince. He used to say, fulfill his will as you would your own will. That's an interesting way to express it. We know God has a lot he wants from us. Imagine serving God like that's what I want, my will. Not this is what God wants, so I am being a good person doing it. If this is what I want, so that he may fulfill your will as it was his will. And Rabbi Gamliel is saying, guess what? It works in both directions. When you do what God wants, as if it's really what you want, that's why you're doing it with all the passion of what you want. God reciprocates in kind. And he does what you want as if that's really what he wants. It's pretty good payback. So that he may set aside the will of others before your will. That if there's a conflict, he's going to honor your will just as you're honoring his will. Hillel said, do not separate yourself from the community. Do not be sure of yourself until the day you die. Meaning even very good people could fall flat on their face spiritually, just the same way you could fall flat on your face physically. And a person can never be in a space of saying, oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm like a done deal. I'm beyond messing up. That's never going to happen to me. No such thing for any of us in any area. It was very funny. I was speaking to my son. This is reminding me. My son, he's almost 17, his phone and a filter. And he's like, well, Mom, why don't you have a filter on your phone? And I was like, he's right. I'm like, I could say it's not my temptation. I have no desire to look at any of these things. I don't have any time for it. None of those are good answers. I said, you're absolutely right. I need to get a filter on my phone. I just never got around to it. It's not a good answer, but you're absolutely right. None of us can say we are beyond. None of us are beyond. Do not condemn your fellow man until you have stood in his place. Meaning, don't judge another person if you haven't been there. Now, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya takes this phrase, don't judge another man until you're in his place, and says, what do we mean by his place? And the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, says his place means on two levels. We all have two levels with the concept of our place. We have our outer world, the world we're in currently, the world we grew up in. Imagine someone who was, like, so to speak, raised on a street corner. And then you're comparing yourself to that person. You've got no clue their morals, their values, their experiences, their traumas. How can you judge them? How can you understand them? How can you condemn them? Or currently, very often, actually always, we have no clue what's going on in anyone else's life. Like sometimes someone could ask you a favor and you could feel, well, that's so inappropriate. Why did they ask me to do that? Well, let's say you knew that they were battling with an illness, a really serious illness. Of course you would do it for them. You'd be so happy to do it for them. What can I do to help you? Well, now you just don't know. And it's not actually a physical illness. And maybe they're battling with a mental illness. Maybe they're battling with an emotional illness. Maybe they're just overwhelmed by life and they don't have any anchors or supports. You have no clue. And then that's all the outer place of the person. There's also their inner world. The inner world is you don't know the intensity of the negative pulls inside another person. Like you could look at a person and you could be like, oh my gosh, they're being so inappropriate. You don't know. You don't know what they really want to do. You don't know how much they're controlling themselves. I remember very clearly, I was speaking in a certain place, a certain country, a certain city. And so they put me up at someone's house. And the woman was dressed rather immodestly. And okay, you sort of register that because you're staying in this person's house and, seemingly they're going to feed you. And I spoke, and then after the lecture, I went back to her house and we started talking. And I think we spoke like the entire night. For hours and hours and hours we spoke. And she was telling me of all her inner struggles and of what she really wants to do. And of how much she's controlling herself in terms of what she is doing. And it was like, wow, I'm, judging her. Oh my gosh, she's really not very modest. I should only know her, what she's doing, perhaps to God, her modesty is perhaps far more beautiful to God than mine. Because look how much she's struggling inside. Look how much she's controlling herself. Look how much she's battling. So when we're looking at someone else, don't condemn, don't judge someone else until you're in their place. We have no clue their history of their outer world. We have no clue what's going on now in their world. And we for sure have no clue of their inner world, of their inner struggles. So if you take this concept and apply it to a situation, to a person, how do you see how it can help you? How do you see how this could be practically very useful to remember? How do you think it'll affect you? I think it would make a person much more tolerant, much more compassionate. If you can take away the judgments, you're taking away so many barriers between you and another person. I know for myself, something that helps me, as just my own little tip in this direction, is if I see someone doing something wrong that's bothering me, I think to myself, that person's just like me. I do plenty of things wrong. I'm not doing this wrong. I do other things wrong. Me and this person are exactly the same. I mess up my way and he or she messes up his way, her way. No difference, just different window dressing. So somehow when I think of it like that, I'm so much more tolerant and compassionate. Because I remember that I also do wrong. I also mess up. I'm also inappropriate. Not the way they are, but in other ways. So then it's like, oh, well, if I also mess up, what they're doing, I totally understand now. Because I do the same thing, just different specific details. So that helps me often, just like not get into the space of judgment, not get in the space of condemning, judging, looking down on someone else. We have no clue past, no clue present, no clue inner world. And I mess up plenty of times. Hey, we're exactly the same. I don't want anyone to look down on me. They're no worse than I am. And I should be able to tolerate and respect that because I have plenty of toleration for myself. Becca?
I think my issue is where finding that balance between noticing the behavior, noticing their behavior or whatever, and maybe doing a certain amount of judgment, but then I also think about, I do that. I go through that process and I think, okay, but you're doing this and you're doing that and blah, blah, blah. And so, but then it seems like sometimes the pendulum swings from one side to the other, so that sometimes I can go to the extreme of being too judgmental, and then, oh, I don't want to be that judgmental. So then I go to the other extreme of being too lax.
Why is it lax to be non-judgmental?
Well, I mean, okay, but I don't want to let people just tromp all over me with their behavior. You know what I mean? It's like there has to be some kind of
so you're talking about a behavior that's harming you, or not like you're observing someone else's behavior, but like you're allowing someone to treat you inappropriately.
Right.
So I think within that, it's fine to have healthy boundaries and healthy, these are my needs, not judging you at all, but these are my needs. But at the same time, as I'm expressing my needs and those needs have to be upheld, it's a very subtle space to just stay in that non-judgmental, compassionate, tolerant, respectful, understanding space, and the other person can completely feel it. It's completely obvious when you're saying your needs have to be respected and you're in a space of compassion and tolerance, or you're in a space of condemnation and judgment. And it's I think sometimes also something else that helps me stay non-judgmental is we have a teaching that says that sometimes what God does is he sets up a situation that we see someone else doing something wrong, and the judgment we pass on them is really a self-judgment on ourselves when we're doing things wrong. So that sometimes keeps me nice and tolerant, understandingly tolerant.
So it would be good if I say, okay, I understand how this is for you. I understand this is where you're at right now. I just can't, have this or that. These are my limitations. Yeah.
And when you really feel inside non-judgmental and tolerant and compassionate and respectful, the other person knows it. They totally know. And when you don't, they totally know. Do not make an ambiguous statement which is not readily understood. Think you will ultimately be understood. And don't say, when I'll have free time, I'll study. Maybe you'll never have free time. How many of us here tell that to ourselves? You can raise your virtual hand if you ever told yourself, when I have time, that's when I'll study. Or when I have more time, that's when I'll pray more. Or when I have more time, that's when I'll say more Psalms. Hillel said, don't go there. And what if God's never going to give you more time? What if you're going to be at this pace or more intense for the rest of your life? Or as long as you're still capable of studying and saying these Psalms and praise. So it's respect the time we have, respect it's today, respect it's probably not going to be more tomorrow. And with all the limitations of today, study, pray, say Psalms, prioritize God. Never push it off to like that never land of when I have more time. Though I do remember in the beginning of COVID, a friend of mine said in one of my other classes, she said, now's the test. She said, because until now, she could always tell herself, when I have time, guess what? Now you have time. Now you're stuck at home. You can't go anywhere. You're working virtually, which means basically you weren't really working. You got all the time. What are you going to do with it? So that was a bit of a test for a lot of people. But guess what? Now, hopefully life is much more normalized. And the challenge and the ability is today. Don't envision tomorrow there's more time, or next week there's going to be more time, or next month there's going to be more time, or this summer there's going to be more time, or you never know. Every day we bless God and thank God and praise God for giving us another day of life. Remember, we discussed that Modeh Ani prayer, that early morning prayer of saying, thank you, God, for giving me today. So make today count. Don't ever rely on tomorrow. Okay. Mishnah 5. He used to say, this is Hillel the elder, one of the greatest of the sages. He used to say, an ignorant person, well, a boor is not really a coarse person. That's probably a better translation for it. Cannot be fearing of sin. An ignoramus cannot be someone who does more than the strict letter of the law. A bashful person cannot learn because you're embarrassed to say you don't understand something. A short-tempered person cannot teach because you get impatient and lose it with your students. Nor can anyone who is much occupied in trade become a scholar, because if you're so involved in making the buck and then the next buck and the next buck, you just don't spend the time you need. That's going to be later, which we just discussed. And in a place where there are no men, strive to be a man. I thought that was a very powerful concept. In a place where there are no men, strive to be a man. Does this resonate? Have you ever felt this in your life? That there's something, how I would translate this is, there's something that needs to be done. And you're completely incapable of doing it. But no one else around you is doing it. And there's a sense of, well, I'm in a place where there's no men. I'm in a place where there's nobody's going to stand up to the plate. So I'm being told here, when the place where there's no men, strive to be a man. Have any of you ever had this experience? Does this resonate inside of you as something you've felt? So I don't know if hands are up now from before or from now. So maybe take down your previous hand. You can hit the same button and put them up, and now it says lower your hand. It's very, Zoom is so nice and convenient. And Miriam's is still up. So maybe she's talking about this situation where, like, well, there's nobody around that's taking care of this. There's nobody around that's doing this. I would think for a Noahide, that's actually a real concept that comes up. Because here you are, you have this knowledge of God, you have this awareness of God, you have this relationship with God. And very often for most of you, it's pretty much a solo journey. There's not a lot of people around you that are clued in. And then sometimes it's like the sense of, but there's like, maybe with people conversations or friends or at work, or what's going on in the world around you or your city or area. And it's, wait, where there's no men, strive to be a man. If no one else is stepping up to the plate, because maybe nobody else knows. Nobody else has the information. No one else knows the inner scoop of reality and God and our responsibility to God. So that means, who's supposed to make it happen? In a place where there's no men, strive to be a man. But I'm not
Similar
like
to
that.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Similar to that saying that I definitely resonate with is no one's coming. It's up to you. It is literally up to you. No one's going to come and make you do the right thing or say the right thing or wear the right thing. It's up to you. You have to make those decisions on eating the right thing, and unless you have someone following you around telling what reminding you of what you should and shouldn't be doing. It's up to you to make those right decisions. Just because someone beside you is wearing a tank top or eating something we know we're not supposed to be eating or what have you, it's up to you to say no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Yes, that is. It's not the same sentence, but it is very similar train of thought. And it's really and I think for Noahide, this is a very practical reality. Because, if you're within the Orthodox Jewish world, well, you can always think so-and-so is going to do it. So-and-so is going to be watching, looking at Danielle's statement, and so-and-so is going to be doing it, looking at mine. And as a Noahide living in a place where there really aren't any Noahides around, no one's watching, and no one's going to do it. And when it has to be done, that means it has to be done by you. Becca?
There's a popular saying that I don't entirely agree with, but it's be the change you want to see in the world. Well, it depends on what change you want to see in the world. But I do think that people do look at me. I do look somewhat different than a lot of the people here, as not a lot of people wear head coverings, not a lot of people wear dresses with the leggings underneath and everything. Even my husband said, nobody dresses like that. But I'm trying to be modest, and God is helping me. Hashem is helping me find more modest dresses, actually. So I'm very thankful I've been able to find a few with the higher neckline. Yay. But so I've had people say to me, of course, they call it Christianity, but they look at me and they say, we can tell there's something different about you. We can tell that you believe in God. And I said, well, I'm not so perfect. I'm not such an angel all the time. I hope that I'm being nice more than I'm being wrong now. Being a little different. But so yeah, I have had people say that. It's just I don't know what to say when they say, because the other religion is not me anymore. But
well, I think you could definitely use that as an opening, just like like I remember Danielle saying people come to her house, they see all these books. Oh, it's a great opening to discuss things. So if people say, oh, I see you really, the way you're dressing, you dress really like modestly, you must be a very religious person. And you could say, well, I have a very strong relationship with God as a Noahide. And then they'll be like, as a what? and then you have a golden opportunity to talk about it. But yes, what you're saying, Becca, which is true, it also wasn't exactly what I was saying, but it's a very true point, is that every one of you is a billboard for God. Because every one of you dresses, just give it another month, totally different than everyone else in the world around you. As it gets warmer and warmer, you're going to be dressing more and more differently than everyone else. And so right away, you're going to be noticed. And maybe you talk differently. Maybe you reference God more. Maybe you're more refined in your speech. So yeah, people notice there's something different. And that's a great opportunity to, in a place where there's no men, be a man and bring to these people an awareness of God that motivates you to dress differently and talk differently and act differently and be God's billboard. That's the idea. Every one of us are God's billboards, and we want to make it a great message. So when you're in that situation, you feel there's no one around. The answer is true. Who's around is you. Now what are you going to do about it? All right, let's go to 7. He used to say, this is still Hillel. He started speaking in 4 and 5 and in 6. Now he's in 7. He was one of the greatest sages. He used to say, more meat, more worms. Well, here meat means like literally human flesh. More of one's own flesh is more worms in the grave. More possessions, more worry. More possessions, more worry. How do we combat this? How did you have possessions without worry? I mean, he's saying it's just like the facts, but how do we have our possessions without having worry? Any thoughts on that? In other words, if you have more possessions and you more worry, you have to take care of them. And is someone going to take them? And are you going to lose them? And what's going to be tomorrow with them? Are they going to devalue? Are you putting your money in the right place? Jenny?
Maybe we need to share. We need to learn to share, because when we share, then we don't feel worried. That's how we get more without worrying about what we're gonna have in future. Because it's like being detached on what you have is good. The more we are attached to what we have, we're just hurting ourselves because we worried too much because we have so much. But if we're learning how to give and being detached on that, we should only be attached to God, not to anything. That's what I think.
You said 2 things that I think were both really good, answering my question. I mean, Hillel's saying the more possessions, the more worry, and I'm saying, so how do we have possessions without worry? We want to have it all. So Jenny's saying 2 points, I think both very true. She said the more you share, the more you give, then you're not worried about your possessions. And she also said, when you detach from them, you have them. You're grateful for them. You're grateful for God for giving you them. And that's it. Less. So it broke. So it got ruined. So I lent it and never got it back. So I lent it. It came back ruined. So I had a guest that made a mess. So if it's not so meaningful to you, I mean by being detached, because you said because what's meaningful to you is God and your relationship with God. So it broke. So I lost it. So someone ruined it. Move on. And it's nice because we're definitely blessed in this generation of having such abundance like people never had before us. The people with so little in America or Canada in this times have so much more than people in the past that had a lot had. Our little is a lot. So we all, relatively speaking to what the world's been through, have a lot.
And also, Mrs. Toren, if we share when we give, then we're not worried because we know God is taking good care of our business. He's taking good care of everything in our life. We're not worried about sickness or whatever because we know when we give, God is blessing us, in His own way.
That is so true. That is so true. And I think that's the security blanket we all have, that when we're walking God's road, God's taking good care of us. And sometimes when we get nervous about anything, we have to remind ourselves that everything is God. There's nothing but God. And if I know I'm walking God's road, I know He's taking good care of me. So what better way to walk God's roads with possessions than to share them? And when I'm sharing with others, I know God's going to take very good care of mine. And of course, that's what we say in terms of charity. I remember we discussed charity. We had a whole class on charity. We had 2 classes on charity. And we spoke about this concept that is the ultimate financial planning, is giving charity, Because when you give charity, God says, I'm paying you back manifold. I'm paying you back as much as you give. I'm giving you back much more. You're giving your 10%, I'm creating the other 90%. So you never have to have any worry over your possessions, because as long as you keep giving charity and increasing your charity, God increases and increases and increases what's flowing in our direction. So maybe it got lost, and maybe it got ruined, and maybe it broke. No big deal. It's so meaningless to me because I know more money's coming in, because I know God's taking such good care of, because I know I'm walking his road, and I know I'm giving charity. So I think these ideas of sharing what you have, detaching from what you have, and giving too generously, so to speak, charity, are all great ways to overcome the other normal worries of possessions. And I think the detaching is big, and the sharing is big, and the giving bountifully charity is big. All three of them are really great tips to make sure that the possessions aren't a worry. The possessions are just God's way of showering us with bounty. And we take it as such. We appreciate it as such. We know that's what's going on. And we know we're very blessed by God in everything. Okay. Let's do, I mean, he goes on both in the negative and the positive there, but let's go on to another one. Let's go to number 15. 15 is Rabbi Tarfon, another great sage. Rabbi Tarfon said, sort of resonates with what we were mentioning before about don't push off learning. You never know when you will have time. The day is short. The day is short. The work is much. The workmen, the people that are supposed to be your support team, are lazy. The reward is great, and the master, God, is pressing. The day is short. Do you ever feel this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is it a when we're aware that the day is short, is that a positive or a negative space of mind? Like, is that a good thing to feel the day is short, or is that a not such a great thing to feel the day is short?
Both.
It depends. Yeah, I would say in general, I think it's positive. In other words, the day is short means I gotta move, I gotta do, I gotta accomplish. Now, again, if you feel the day is short, I'm just like, I'm choked and I feel like such pressures, I can't function. No, that's not positive. But in a healthy way, it's a positive thing to feel the day is short. You know, in English, they have this horrific expression called killing time. Or you don't know the expression, you just see people like on their phone just going, maybe now they're going like this, depending if they have an Android or an iPhone. And it's like, the day is short. We should walk around with that pulse of the day is short. There's much work to do. There's much to accomplish. Well, I have nothing to accomplish. No one's expecting anything from me. I've got nothing I have to do. My house is clean. I ate already. I know what I'm having for supper. There's nothing to do. No. Relook at your life. Relook at what you could do with your life. Relook what you could do with an hour. And feel that pulse of the day is short. There's much work to do. And the workmen are lazy. There's no one else relying on me. Maybe it's going to be self-work. What can I accomplish in terms of myself? What can I accomplish in terms of prayer, in terms of study, in terms of Psalms, in terms of realigning myself? The day is short. There's much work to do. And God is pressing. God's like, there's so much you could do with a day. Don't waste it. You know, unfortunately, lately, it's been a lot of sudden deaths, at least I've seen a lot. I mean, obviously Corona and since, not always Corona related, just a lot of like passings. And that's one of the things we're supposed to get from it. Life is short and life is precious, and don't waste the gift. Becca?
I just wanted to, I just wanted to ask that, okay, what about a person that feels like they have too much to do, like there's just so much to do, and the day is short and I'll never get everything done that I need to do or that I should do. They feel very overwhelmed, and how am I going to do all of this?
Right. I totally understand. That's the other end of that. That's what I said. Is it positive or negative? And I said overwhelmingly is positive, but it could be negative if it stymies you. In other words, if a person feels like choked and pressured and like sometimes, because I plan my day the night before, and there are definitely some days where I look at it, I'm like, how am I going to survive? What I'm going to have to do, boom, 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 boom. And I see it, and I'm totally right. That is exactly what the day is like. Boom, 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 boom. And you know what? When I know those days are coming, I just tell myself, like, breathe, and you're going to survive it. And maybe you'll recover on Shabbos, even though it's Sunday. It might take 6 more days, but it will come. And maybe you're going to tell yourself, okay, Monday, or well, no, not Monday either, Tuesday, Wednesday. Like sometimes you have to look ahead and say, yes, tomorrow's going to be one of those days and crazy and build. And then you have to say, thank God I can do it all. Thank God I still can function. Thank God I'm needed. And there's so much I'm going to accomplish with this day. It's sort of like with my special needs son. So he has a high elopement issue, which means he runs away fast. And when he's running fast away from me, I try to be in a positive space and tell myself, thank God he can run so quickly. It'd be worse if he couldn't, or if he's doing something clever and wrong. I'm like, thank God he was able to think of that one. It's not what I wanted to do. It's not what I need him to do, but thank God he's smart enough to figure that one out. So similarly for ourselves, thank God I'm still accomplishing a lot. Thank God there's so much on my plate, and today is going to be a very productive, draining, productive day that I know I'm giving to God. I know I'm accomplishing. I know I'm living. I know I'm alive. Sort of like it says in the Talmud, if you see an animal in the water, how do you know if they're alive or dead? And it says, well, if they're going with the current, they're dead. And if they're fighting the current, they're alive. So if I'm still busy and accomplishing, I'm alive, I'm living. So it's going to be a draining tomorrow. It might be a few tomorrows. I know that. But I'm grateful I'm alive. I'm grateful I have what to give God. I'm grateful God's using me. I'm grateful I'm busy and doing and accomplishing, and I'll sleep in a few days. So that's what I would tell myself for that overwhelmed reality, and I can relate to it, trust me. But in general, the positive message here is we should view life as a precious gift that we don't know how long we have this gift for. And every single day, that was again, as we discussed in that Moda Ani prayer that we wake up in the morning and say, every single day is a gift. Every single day means God trusted us and gave us another day. What am I going to do with his gift? At the end of the day, I say, nothing. I didn't really do anything today that was meaningful. I didn't do anything today that was, higher than taking care of my own needs. I wasted a day. God gave me a day and I wasted it. I want to infuse a day with kindness for others, love for others, a relationship with God. I want to know I lived. Now, there's a prayer we say in the mornings. We say that we should not have lived for emptiness, for vanity, for nothingness. And that's so sad to look back and say, what did I accomplish today? No, I lived. I went to this class. I lived. I helped someone else. I lived. I called someone and made them feel good. I lived. I was nice to a person. I lived. I prayed. I lived. The day is short. There's much work to do. And God is pressing because he wants a lot out of us. He knows what we can accomplish and he wants us to do it. So we should all merit to live, to know we're living, to know we're accomplishing, to know we're making the day count, to know we're giving it to God. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. So glad everyone could make it. And so nice, especially seeing the face I could see and everyone else coming as well. Thank you so much.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov and happy Mother's Day.
Hi.
Yes, happy Mother's Day.
Cyril,
Yeah.
it's Miriam. I just want to say, if you think it's funny, I didn't know that you have class on Sunday. And it's one of the best for me. I love Pirkei Avot. I just, a while ago, I read it and with somebody who explained me a lot. And I find it so, so precious and useful. I want almost like to give to every person explanation. I may forget something. I may not remember every passage how, but I'm so grateful. And then today I was thinking, just let's think, maybe there is some class here. And here I am.
Wow.
I clicked, and that's the
That's
best, like
amazing.
my favorite teaching, right?
That's amazing. That's the
So,
hand of God.
yeah.
This
yeah.
class is every week from, I mean, this time, I don't know, I know you're on the West Coast, so for you, I don't know what time it is. For me,
Now
it's probably
it's
like
now
5:30 to 6:30.
6:34.
Yeah, so it's 5:30 to
Yes, that's right.
6:30 every Sunday.
You're
It's
right.
not always in Pirkei Avot. This is a Noahide class. It happened to be.
Okay.
So
But
it was
but
God
it just
said, yeah. You
it just
clicked
meant to
on
be
what
right.
you love. It was there for
Yes.
you.
Yes.
You could
I
join us
wanted
next
to,
week. See.
yeah, I wanted to do something meaningful. My birthday is ER8.
Oh,
And
okay.
this
So
year,
that's tonight, tomorrow.
right. So tonight it's a beginning, right?
Uh-huh.
And if considering that I was born in Kiev, I am already born. So it's already went by. And interesting enough, this year it's exactly the same day when I was born, May 9.
Oh,
So I feel like there
it
is
must be it must be a multiple of 19.
I don't know that.